The nurses had stopped trying to coax him out of the hallway hours ago. Still, Mark sat there, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tight his knuckles were white, staring at the closed ICU door as though staring hard enough might break it open and give him the miracle he needed. Inside that room, his little girl was fighting for her life. 7-year-old Lily, with the laugh that could melt steel and the stubborn courage of her mother. The mother she'd lost 2 years ago. The mother he'd promised to protect in the only way he still could, by protecting their daughter. But tonight, he was losing. The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. Experimental treatment, too expensive, insurance maxed out, payment needed immediately. He'd tried everything: loans, second jobs, selling the house, begging distant relatives. Now he was on his last scrap of hope, a name scribbled on a sticky note by an old hospital volunteer. Go to him, she'd whispered. He helps people who have no one else. He doesn't ask why. Just go. A billionaire CEO. A man whose world existed somewhere between private jets and penthouse boardrooms. A man Mark would normally never dare approach. But for Lily, he'd walk into fire. The address didn't look real. Mark double-checked his phone as he stood in front of the massive wrought iron gates. He felt ridiculous. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoes were worn, and his face held the exhaustion of a man stretched beyond breaking. He looked like someone security would escort out on sight. But when he pressed the intercom, a calm voice simply said, "Come in." The gates opened. He stepped inside a world built on wealth he could hardly imagine. Sculpted gardens. A driveway long enough to get lost on. A mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The door opened before he could knock. A silent man in a suit nodded and guided him through polished marble halls until they reached an enormous room filled with art, glass, and impossible light. And there, standing in front of a fireplace, was the CEO. Daniel Hawthorne. Even people who didn't follow business knew the name. The man created empires the way other people made grocery lists, quickly, efficiently, relentlessly. He turned when Mark entered. His expression wasn't cold or arrogant or irritated. It was unreadable, like someone carrying 10 different emotions behind a locked door. "You're Mark Bennett," Daniel said quietly, as if confirming something long suspected. Mark swallowed. Yes. Thank you for seeing me. I know you don't usually meet people like me." Daniel's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. "Sit. Tell me why you're here." Mark did. He told him everything. The diagnosis. The failed treatments. The cost. The terror. The way he'd reached a point where pride stopped mattering. "I'm not asking for charity," he said, voice breaking. "I'll pay back every cent, even if it takes the rest of my life. I just need to save my daughter." Silence stretched. Then Daniel said, "Before we discuss that, there's something I want to show you." He walked to a nearby wall, pressed a hidden switch, and a panel slid open, revealing a small gallery space. Mark stepped closer. And froze. Because on the wall, in a beautiful frame, was a photograph. A photograph he knew better than any image in the world. It was his wife. His late wife. Her bright eyes. Her easy smile. The way she held Lily, who was only a baby then. Mark's throat closed so violently he staggered. "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why is my wife's photo in your home?" He turned, dizzy, terrified he had somehow stepped into a nightmare. But Daniel didn't look startled. He looked like a man who had waited for this question for years. "Because she saved my life," Daniel said softly. "And I never knew her name until the day she died." Mark felt the room tilt. Daniel gestured for him to sit, then spoke quietly, like someone recounting a story too precious to break. 15 years ago, Daniel said, I wasn't the man you see today. I was angry, bitter, obsessed with success because I believed it was the only thing that mattered. One night, I had a moment. A particularly dark one." He paused. "I was standing on a bridge." Mark's lungs stilled. "And your wife," Daniel continued, voice tight with memory, "was the only person who stopped. The only one. She talked to me for an hour in the cold. Listened. Told me life wasn't something you walked away from when it hurt. She didn't know who I was. She didn't ask anything in return. She just helped a stranger." He swallowed. "And she saved me." Mark's eyes burned. His wife, her kindness wasn't something she ever bragged about. She just gave, endlessly, peacefully. "She never told me," Mark whispered. "She wouldn't have," Daniel said. People like her never do. He walked closer to the photograph. I spent years trying to find her, to thank her. But I only recognized her again when I saw a news article about the accident. He looked at Mark with grief that seemed impossible from a man so powerful. I went to the funeral. I stood far in the back. I promised myself I'd repay the debt if life ever gave me the chance. He stepped forward. And tonight, it did. Mark couldn't speak. Daniel handed him a folder. Inside was a signed authorization for Lily's full treatment, every penny covered. Additional funds for ongoing care. A trust for her future. And a personal phone number with the note, anytime. Anything. Mark shook his head, tears falling freely. I can't accept this much. You're not accepting charity, Daniel said gently. I'm honoring a promise. But, no. Daniel's voice was firm but warm. Your wife saved me without knowing who I was. Without expecting anything. Now, I'm helping her daughter. This isn't business. This is humanity. Mark covered his face with his hands and sobbed, deep, shaking sobs he'd held in for months. Daniel didn't look away. He waited, silent, steady, unflinching in his resolve. When Mark finally lifted his head, Daniel put a hand on his shoulder. Go be with your daughter, he said. Let me take care of the rest. 3 days later, Lily's treatment began. And it worked. Slowly at first. Then steadily. Then miraculously. Mark stayed by her side every moment. Daniel visited quietly, always bringing something, flowers, books, a stuffed animal shaped like a cartoon lion. He never stayed long, never intruded, but Lily adored him with the instant, uncomplicated trust of a child. One evening, as Mark watched Lily doze peacefully for the first time in weeks, Daniel stood beside him and said, "Your wife once told me something." Mark glanced at him, surprised. She said, "People think the world is saved by big gestures. But it's really saved by small ones, one person choosing kindness when they don't have to." His voice softened. She lived that. And now Lily gets to live because of it. Mark blinked hard. I wish she could see this. She does, Daniel said simply. And somehow, Mark believed him. Months passed. Lily recovered, fully, joyfully, miraculously. She danced again, laughed again, lived again. And Daniel became part of their lives, not as a savior or a billionaire, but as a friend. Someone who showed up at school recitals, who taught Lily how to beat him at chess, who helped Mark rebuild himself after years of fear and exhaustion. One summer afternoon, as they stood watching Lily run through a park, Daniel said something that made Mark's chest tighten. She'd be proud of you, Daniel murmured. Your wife. She'd be proud of the father you are. Mark exhaled shakily. And she'd be grateful for what you've done. Daniel shook his head. I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it because she showed me what kind of person I wanted to be. He looked at Mark with quiet conviction. And because no child deserves to lose both their parents. Mark felt something settle inside him, something like peace. Maybe fate wasn't random. Maybe kindness didn't vanish when someone died. Maybe love left footprints that eventually led you exactly where you needed to be. A year later, Lily celebrated her 8th birthday in Daniel's garden, the same place where Mark had once stood desperate and broken. Now it was filled with balloons, laughter, and sunlight. As Mark watched Lily blow out her candles, Daniel stepped beside him. What do you think she wished for? Daniel asked. Mark smiled. Probably something wild. A pony. A treehouse. A puppy. Daniel shook his head. Kids who've touched the edge of darkness wish for simple things. Mark nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess they do. Lily ran over, grabbing both their hands. I wished for us, she announced proudly. For my family. Mark felt his heart stretch in his chest. Daniel froze, just for a second, then smiled, a real smile, one that reached deep into the corners of his guarded past. And in that moment, the world felt small, gentle, and profoundly good. Because kindness had come full circle. Because one woman's simple, selfless act had saved 3 lives. Her daughters, her husbands, and a billionaire's who had once stood alone on a bridge. Because humanity, at its core, was still powerful. And because love, real love, never died. It simply found new hands to carry it forward.